If you got a comment or question, this is what we call the Afterburn. So welcome to the Afterburn. And so we're going to bring a microphone around for those who have comments or questions about this teaching specifically. And so if you're online, Rob is still manning the online desk there. And so he'll take down your comments or questions, and then we'll get those over the mic as well. And we'll begin with Mr. Kirk.
Thanks for that concept with the absent from the body, present with Elohim. That's amazing. I've never seen that before. Also, I wanted to ask you about John 4:23, where Yeshua talks about worshiping Him in spirit and truth. Is this a continuation of that?
Absolutely. Okay, because when he says that he seeks those that worship in spirit and truth, and we talked about this over and over and over again, is the idea of the truth being the letter and the spirit being the fullness of how the letter was intended. Okay? And that's consistent with all of Messiah's teachings as well as everything else in Scripture. You know, when they got in trouble, it wasn't just because they weren't keeping the letter. A lot of times they were doing it without the fullness of how he intended it. And he always intended it to be done in the form of emunah, with full, confident, complete trust and belief in him and what he's doing, and that he would do his part and take care of the things that he needs to take care of, etc. And that's really the key, is that they lacked that peace. Not peace like as in shalom, but like that element. They were not doing it with the emunah. Now, of course, if they did, they'd have the peace, like as in shalom. All right, who wants the mic? All right, Candace.
Rabbi, your teachings are always kind of similar in the fact that they're always teaching us about authority, Yahweh's authority and stuff. And a thought came to my mind about my own life from years ago when I was married to my children's father. And I wrote this thought. I said, authority is important because if we follow Yahweh's authority, then others, by our example, will follow authority correctly. And why this came to my mind is because when I was married to Wayne, he would come home and he would bash our preacher. We were in the Christian church, and this preacher was really good to us. But I think he was very jealous, but he not only was very critical and wanted to bring this preacher down, he was that same way with me. And it made it really hard for me to follow Wayne's authority. And I found it easy to follow the pastor's authority, but Wayne's authority was really hard because he was harsh and punitive. So I think if we're following Yahweh's authority, and it's by our example, if we're doing it with faith and in love for Yahweh, then others are going to see that, and they're going to pay attention. Maybe they'll come and follow Yahweh's authority and do it more perfectly.
Amen. I appreciate that comment. Thank you. Look, I know a lot of people are thinking, wow, how does he manage to find every week something that has to do with authority? Because it's everywhere. I don't have to look for it. And it's an issue. This is an issue Paul was having with the Corinthian congregation. He was absolutely struggling with their understanding. But notice that he always demonstrates that the authority is vertical. He says, I have authority here, but that's because that authority comes from above. And that authority is a serving authority to serve in the pointing you towards that which is above. And so, yes, you're right. It seems like every week all we do is talk about authority. But if you read your Bible, now that you've heard me talk about it enough, there's very little places you can go where you can't find that's actually the issue that's going on. A challenge with authority. Okay? Now, it's no surprise then that the enemy has encouraged us to do authority so badly so that people would not want authority. Because after all, you had a bad experience with it, and almost everybody in this room has had at least one, if not multiple, bad experiences with authority being done badly. The problem was not authority, it was that it was being done poorly. And that's really the issue. Okay, where's the mic? Okay, Michelle?
My question is, of course, we all know that Messiah, Yeshua, is love, so we should do everything in love. I think that's the fulfillment of the law right there in my heart, that That's, also you should fear Yeshua, but it's also done in love. You should love your neighbor as yourself. I think that is just so beautiful. But my question is, doesn't he raise up the next ones, the next remnant to go into Israel? Someone said to me, my neighbor, and their grandmother owns a church across the street, and he's a boy, and I guess he's never heard the name Yeshua because I introduced it to him. But he knew everything about the raising up of the second remnant that will go into the land and that will not fear, and that he was going to make them different than the first. There was like, can you tell me a little bit more about this new remnant that's going to be able to go into the land and fulfill and everything that the first one was not able to do? I mean, I know that Joshua was able to fulfill, but supposedly he's supposed to make them capable of not fearing, to have what it takes internally to go in, make it to the city of Petra, to flee the Antichrist, to actually, and then he returns and they supernaturally seals up this remnant. It's an amazing story. That the prophecy is so amazing to me. But what is the second one that's supposed to go in the last days, and how are they supposed to? He's supposed to make them different than the first. Do you know anything about that?
Okay. Well, first of all, I don't know anything about that because I don't know anything about what this guy's saying, and mostly everything you said is not right. Okay, because the guy's coming from a place that he doesn't know what he's talking about. But that's not the point. The point is that's where we have to be careful, though. That's what was going on here in Corinth. We got to be careful who we're listening to that may or may not actually know what they're talking about. And they can impress you because you said it was amazing to you, and I'm sure it sounded very amazing. Okay? But you're now going through listening to somebody who pieced the puzzle together in a way that made sense to them, and it could be very impressive. I don't think that the majority of us are going anywhere near Jerusalem until we're changed in a twinkling, meet him in the air as he's headed there to land on the Mount of Olives. That is in the first resurrection, okay? Now, as far as a remnant being supernaturally protected or how that's all going to work, I have not taught you eschatology, and when he gives me permission to, I will. But in the meantime, I would encourage all of you to be very, very, very reluctant to embrace other people, especially mainstream Christians, eschatology, okay? And so that is an eschatology sort of thing, and let's be really reluctant to go about that. Because,
okay, I don't mean to interrupt you, but in the book of Revelation, I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm not going to debate the book of Revelation with you.
No, I'm just going to ask you a question.
It's not about this teaching. We can talk about it later. Okay? The teaching isn't talking about the book of Revelation and the end times. All right? Okay, look, you're going to have to, and I did interrupt her on purpose, not because it's her, because you all need to understand. You have to be careful about pushing what's important to you and understand that this is about the teaching today. The end times will play out the way they're going to play out. You need to just, look, I've told you, and maybe you haven't heard this because you're new with us, but if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you'll end up where you're supposed to end up. That's all you need to know at this point. I'm not saying that you can't look at other things, but don't worry about the other things. You need to focus on that. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, you'll end up where you'll end up. It is so easy to start getting into end-time debates, and I've told you I do not do end-time teachings. Beware false prophets and the Millennium and Kingdom, that's it. You have those two teachings and possibly a part 4 to the Millennium Kingdom, which is really not so much eschatology. It's more about what does or doesn't happen when you die, that kind of thing. But, okay? But that's all I've offered you at this point because that's all he's given me to do. It's not because I don't have an opinion. It's not because I haven't studied it, not because I don't know anything about it. He just has not wanted me to be distracted or the people that I'm teaching to be distracted with the end time stuff. The end time stuff that matters to you is what you're doing will matter. That's what Paul was saying. Yeshua says it. Moses says it. Everywhere in your Bible says it. Do what you're supposed to be doing and you'll be where you're supposed to be. Is that clear? Okay? But let's not get caught up otherwise in debates and in other things we're arguing about book of Revelation. You have heard very little teachings that I've given you about the book of Revelation, except in the context of pulling out one or two little particular items like the to he who overcomes with all the 7 congregations mentioned, that each one had an overcoming issue. And if they overcame, they received something. Or the verse that says there are those that have the testimony and the Torah. Otherwise, very little. Today I mentioned that at the very end in Revelation, he's bringing a reward according to what you do. But none of it had to do with end time playing out of the eschatology, what the vials are and what the woes are and who's the martyrs and what's it talking about here and there. We're not going to get into that at this point. Okay, I know that that's the kind of stuff that gets the big crowds and fills the stadiums. Everybody wants to know. But you know what? Most of those people are going to be in the wrong place because they're doing the wrong things, but they're going to have all that information in their head that also is probably wrong. And it has served no purpose. Figure out how to love your Elohim. I like that she said that. It's all about love in the context of the way we observe the commandments. If you're not loving him and loving each other right, none of the other information is going to do you any good.
That's right.
Was that clear? If you're not figuring out how to love each other and love him, nothing else is going to matter. And you can watch all the eschatology videos you want, whether it's right or wrong. If you haven't figured out the other piece, it will matter nothing. It'll help you zero. Okay, next question. Okay, Nate.
That was just a refresher on when we first met, because you gave me the same speech at Sukkot about 2 years ago. So thank you.
You're welcome. Because at the time you were very much into the eschatology.
I was,
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure I'm thinking correctly, and I appreciate this teaching because reading Hebrews and all these other places are helping me to look at all of this stuff a little more clearly. So if where it talks about the flesh is passing away, or that which was old is passing away, I was reading that and I was thinking, wow, that has to do with, as I'm learning to lift, instead of looking at the Torah, like where it said that Moshe had the veil and they didn't want to look at him, we're actually asking Abba to allow us to lift that veil so we can look more in the perfect Torah and put that on our hearts in a way that we can walk it out in the spirit. So the flesh is actually starting to pass away. That which is old, or the letter of the law, is passing away in a sense that it's being written on our hearts. So prayerfully, it'll become so much part of us that old letter of the law, we don't need to look at that in order to go, wow, I need to be right with Elohim, because it's the spirit now that we're walking in the letter. Is that making any sense?
Yep.
Okay. Because that's where my mind is kind of.
At some point, you don't need any teachings from me or anybody else telling you to eat kosher or keep Sabbath or observe holy days correctly and not do the other things, because it's now part of who you are. Okay, so from that point of view, I think that's what Nate was talking about. I mean, it's going to be something that you apply, and it's just consistently there. Okay, who's next? Okay, Dawn.
Hi, Rabbi. Wow. My mind is like tripping all over the book. I had never seen that before, again, with the absent from the body. That was amazing. I felt like this was for me. I had a really rough morning, came in late, and I was just like blown away. I think I have like 5 pages of notes in my hand. You're getting me ready for school, aren't you? I see that now. I had a question kind of about something we went over where it talked about, let me see, 5 verse 3. 2 Corinthians 5 verse 3, it says, so that putting it on, we shall not be found naked. So is it a correct assumption? I used to worry about, the wedding, we have to have wedding attire, spiritual wedding attire, and what was that and how do we get it? Am I understanding correctly that if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, that I'll be clothed?
Yes, and I you know what, I skipped that part of the verse because I got distracted with the other thing I was talking about, but there's many times you've heard me teach that, for example, when Adam and Chava saw themselves and realized they were naked, that I've taught you that you realized they were exposed. Not so much that they were naked, but their choices had exposed them and their behavior, because it doesn't happen until after they mess up. Then they realize they're exposed. They're no longer covered necessarily, and I talk about it from a more of a covered by the Father, covered by the spiritual covering type of thing. They've now become exposed. And the same thing I think here is the idea of being naked is being exposed and uncovered, all right? And I didn't get to explain that as part of the verse because I was have 50 other things running in my head trying to cover them all. But that's the kind of connects to that same kind of point. So if you're doing what you're supposed to do, you will be clothed. But you'll also, more from the idea of not so much clothed, but you'll also be covered. Okay, so the idea of naked had more to do with not having a covering or being uncovered. Okay, Rabbi Tom?
Okay, thank you. You mentioned in your message that basically a lot of things in here are a heart issue. And I was thinking about this, and from comments that I've heard and things I've seen on Facebook by people in and out of the body, a lot of people are getting discouraged and losing heart. And a lot of people are downcast and allowing their shalom to be upset. But in 4:16, 2 Corinthians 4:16, it says, therefore we do not lose heart. But even if our outward man is perishing, the inward man is being renewed day by day. And so we can't do anything about the outward man, but the inward man we can. And we renew it by constantly reviewing the Torah and other parts of the Tanakh and the Brit and meditating on them every day, every day, every day. And I think we'll come to see that everything points to Torah, and we'll come to see authority in almost everything we read. And I think that should encourage all of us. So, what I got out of your message today was, let's not worry. Let's not worry about the carnal. We have to get off our throne and concentrate on the spiritual.
Amen. Amen. All right. Thank you. Appreciate that. Who else? Okay, coming around this way. Tamara has her hand up.
He's making fun of my vertically challenged status. Okay, I have a question, and forgive me if you've answered it. It's also in 2 Corinthians 5. At the end of 4, where it's talking about so that what is to die might be swallowed up by life. Could you expound on that?
Say it one more time. Where's the... What?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's 2 Corinthians 5. It's verse 4. It's at the end. Because I know what I interpreted it as, but I just want to make sure that it was correct.
Okay, so that what is to die might be swallowed up by life?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so how are you interpreting that?
Okay, so I've been struggling with, for example, I had a busy week, and my body keeps telling me, just stay home, don't go to the congregation, don't, get some more rest. And I came anyway because I know in my heart that I need to be here and I need to be with my family. And just having to take on new responsibilities from my college classes are, kind of causing me to balance things in a different way that I'm not used to. And so I was wondering if situations, what is to die, like it's supposed to die to that thought that I should, not be here. And all that entails, because I'm going to get swallowed up by
everything that, okay, we go back to when we talked about the, not walking by sight, but walking by belief, and the way you see it versus the way he sees it. So when you ask yourself, okay, I see it, I'm tired, I want to stay home. How does he see it?
Correct.
Okay, so the way you see it has to die, and the way he sees it has to overflow and swallow you up in life.
Okay.
Okay. Now, by the way, back to verse 3, which is the verse that, and by the way, thank you to both of you 2 in a row to explain that this should be an encouragement to all people that choose or feel like they maybe don't want to come, but if you come, you might receive something special that you needed to hear, and that's why you come. Because Dawn said the same thing, sort of, that you did. But it says here, look, in verse 3, it says, so that having put it on, put what on? All this stuff we've just been talking about, doing it his way, seeing it through his sight, we shall not be found naked, but we'll put it on. We shall not be found uncovered. We won't be exposed. We won't be embarrassed, but we'll be covered. We'll be seen and have favor. So that's just to kind of Find the verse that Dawn was talking about. And then in your case, which follows right after that, and because we're covered and we're not exposed, okay, all that we're having die will be covered up and swallowed up in life. And swallowed up is just an idiomatic phrase to say you're just going to be overflowing now. It's like taking the metaphor of the cup that's filled with like sort of muddy water, and you just keep putting the clean water in until it dilutes it out, and it's going to be overflowing to the fact and eventually be clean because you're getting rid of the other. Okay, you have all kinds of metaphors with purging out, or the new wine in a new wineskin and the old wineskin thing. It's all the same ideas of getting rid of and being done with one thing so that the other one can be overflowing. Okay, and really, again, it has to do with mindset and heart. It's not the thing itself, like the law, that's the problem. It's the mindset and the heart as we address these things. Okay, Michelle.
As I was reading that same verse, for indeed we who are in this tent groan, being burdened, not because we wish to put it off, but to put it on, so that what is to die might be swallowed up by life. And going off your teaching, where life interchangeable with Shua, Torah, way, truth, that all these burdens and all these things that we experience will be swallowed up by all of that.
Thank you for reading it again, because when you read it out loud, certain words hit me that I didn't hit on. The idea of being burdened and groaning. This goes back to, like we said last time, with James chapter 4. Okay? That which needs to die, sometimes we want to hold on to it. And so you're going to have to lament and mourn and weep and get it over with, because you're focusing on that is why you're upset, the thing that you have to let go of, instead of focusing on what you're putting on. And so I'm glad that you read it out loud, because I got to hear it again, and the Ruach could say, look, indeed we are in the tent, and while we're in here, we groan, being burdened, not because we wish to put it off, because we don't. We want to keep it. We like it. There's things about it we don't want to let go of, but because rather we want to be focused on what we need to put on. And so you may have to go back to James 4 and lament and mourn and weep, etc., and just get over it. Because you don't want to let go of that which is comfortable and that which you've enjoyed and you like and all the other things to go into this other place. But if you want it and focus on it bad enough, by taking your eyes off of what you can see and seeing it through his eyes, remember, go back to that whole metaphor too, then you will desire to focus on what you're putting on, not what you're letting go of. Okay? Good point. See, sometimes a verse, if it just gets read enough times, we could pull a whole bunch of stuff out of it. Okay, who's next? Okay, Daweed.
Just a big wow. From the very beginning, you hit me hard. And even though you weren't necessarily solely talking to me, you were, just from the very beginning. And you know my background, and several people here do, but some don't. I came out of Christianity and basically Baptist, Pentecostal, charismatic, kind of interdenominational, non-denominational. And I went through Messianic Judaism, like MJA, which is very focused on bloodline, into more of a Orthodox side of things. Actually going to Orthodox synagogues in Israel and places like that. And I was very focused on, trying to do the Torah. And at the time, I was trying to do the Torah based on what they were doing, but even then, I was focused on my own ways and my own perspectives on how that looked. And so in private, it wasn't even entirely as they saw it. And I never told them that I was a believer in Yeshua. I never tried to push that on them because I knew how much of a big topic that was, and I just didn't want to go there, and I didn't want to give them that kind of grief. Fast forward to having been rejected by them when they found out I was a believer in Yeshua, and then coming to this place, I have found that I, to a certain extent, have been doing some of the same stuff, because I've been kind of sort of following what you say, but not fully following it. And I've been letting a lot of the stuff that's in the past influence what I'm doing now. From Christianity and Orthodox Judaism. It's just a big hodgepodge mess. And the words which you were saying in the very beginning, when you were first talking, going into chapter 3, hit me hardest because I realized that, yes, indeed, I've been doing much of the same thing, either coming from the quote-unquote Gentile / coming into Torah side of things, or from the Orthodox side and seeing it more from that perspective. Either way, I'm hit hard. And I just wanted to acknowledge that and reiterate the fact that you are my discipler, and I am doing my best to follow much more closely what you say.
Amen.
And in some respects, I've been seeing some of the blessings of that. But the bottom line is, there's a lot of stuff that's come out that is a lot of heat, partially because of my CDL class, and I'm in Tamara's same boat. I mean, I'm dealing with a lot of rescheduling stuff and trying to sort stuff out, and I'm also realizing part of the leadership stuff is if I start getting into my fears, my wife starts getting into her fears, and then a whole bunch of our stuff gets stirred up, and so I just wanted
And if
to
you
say,
if you had children, it would spill over to the children. I mean, that's one of those things.
Yes.
That what happens with the leader spills over, and it just keeps spilling and spilling and spilling.
right. And
Yeah.
so I just wanted to thank you for your leadership and thank you for everything that's been happening, and apologize for every bit of grief I've been giving you and all that, because I know that you're trying, and I don't make it easy.
Okay, thank you. All right. Candace?
Yeah, Rabbi, I want to thank you too, because during this lesson, and I'm hoping I'm using the word concentric correctly, that I need to make Yahweh more concentric in my life. In other words, I need to write down every day, I need to write a schedule that includes more of Him in my life and less of myself.
All right, let's call it making yourself more Elohim-centric.
Yeah,
Okay?
okay.
In other words, Elohim-centered.
Well, I need to do that. I
Okay.
mean, I'm not doing enough of that. So
Okay, good.
today's lesson helped me see that I need to do that.
Okay, good. All right, go ahead and bring it back to the live streamers.
Okay, from Sam Davison, says, can you explain 5:9 more thoroughly? How can it be that our aim to please Him if we are in our flesh?
Okay, and I thought I explained that, but I can explain a little bit more. I mean, look, we're not sure here, because half of what Paul's trying to do is get the attention of the congregation as far as focusing on themselves, but a big part of it is focusing on the leadership and himself. And he's trying to apply, I think here he's trying to apply it to himself, saying, so we also, okay, we see that happening here, make it our aim to be well-pleasing to Him, whether being at home or being away, okay? Now, he's talking about home now as opposed to being in the body or not in the body, the flesh or not in the flesh. He says, we try to do this when we're here and even when we're not here with you. But also, while we're still in this flesh suit, taking it more literally, we try to be well-pleasing to the Father while we are still dwelling in flesh, until we actually are no longer dwelling in flesh. So I thought I mentioned that, but I'll just say it again just in case. I mean, it's very easy as I'm, blasting away all that stuff at warp speed that, that could be missed. But I think that those are the two possible things he's talking about here. Again, remember, he's writing to a group of people that hopefully understood exactly what he was saying, and we're guessing at a bunch of this stuff. So I would say those two interpretations are likely applicable here. Next.
All right, from Olivier and Janet Hoffman. Question 1, Rabbi, I long to be more present with Elohim. Can you give us some concrete things we can do to stay more in His presence and have that vertical awareness continually in our lives?
Well, I mean, you just have to find ways for yourself that will trigger a reminder to always be asking yourself, am I looking at this through my eyes or His eyes? I mean, everybody's going to be different how they can do that, and can come up with, things that you can do to kind of remind yourself to check in. So just sort of a way to check in on a regular basis. Hey, am I looking at things through His eyes or my eyes? I mean, that's really the thing. Are you in your flesh? Is it a me thing? Or is it a more him thing? And so we just have to heighten our awareness. It takes practice, it takes time, but it starts off with what you just did, a desire to do that. So once you at least start off with a desire to do that, at least you're initially, going to make the progress. That's step one. Okay.
Okay, question 2. Rabbi, would you please explain a bit more chapter 4, verse 13, when Paul quoted, "I believed, therefore I spoke." Is this talking about the witness we are supposed to bear?
Well, look, again, this is going through the same process of where he's trying to make a case for him versus whoever else they're listening to. Now, if you are someone in leadership, which if this is Sam, Sam, you are in leadership to a certain degree with your small group there, then you can say the same thing once you are trained to do the speaking. Right now, you're being trained, so you're doing a lot of listening. Okay? But I would be somebody, for example, that would be able to say something, look, having the same spirit of belief according to what has been written, I believe, therefore I spoke. We also believe, therefore we also speak. This is still part of, remember, verse 1 started off with, do we need to begin to prove our qualifications for you? All right? So remember, there's a theme going through all this that didn't stop since verse 1 of chapter 3. Here we are in the middle of chapter 4, almost the end of chapter 4, and we still see that in chapter 5 and going forward in chapter 6. Paul is having a hard time with some people, for whatever reason, starting to listen to other people and not listening to him, and losing the respect of his authority within the group.
Okay, from Shauna. 2 Corinthians 3:16 cites Exodus 34:34. Would you please talk about that verse in light of 2 Corinthians 3:18?
Right, Exodus what?
34:34.
Yeah, no, again, I think I explained this, so I don't see any difference there. I did say that, in 34:34, it says that when Moses went in to speak to Yahweh, he would remove the veil until he came out, and when he came out, he spoke to the children of Israel what he had been commanded. The idea that he removed it, well, he only needed the veil because the people had a problem looking at him, not because Yahweh would have a problem looking at him. So he removed the veil. We could, I guess, look at it from the metaphor of when the people decided after the 10 Commandments were given, hey, hold on, we don't want to hear from him directly. Okay? But the thing is here in verse 18, it says, we all, as with unveiled face, we see as in the mirror. Okay? So again, with unveiled face, I think we're going back to the mind and the heart all being veiled. He's talking about things being hidden more this way. I know he is quoting from the idea of Exodus, but we're also talking about here, it says, and we all, as with unveiled face, we see as in a mirror the esteem of Yahweh. So we're seeing him straightforward. We're seeing him without veils filtering. Let's be careful that we don't mix the metaphors, because Paul does a great enough job mixing them for us, okay? Because he uses things in 3 different ways, and he's using the same phrase, and sometimes the English from the Greek can get confusing. Okay, but he's saying, look, we are now seeing things without filters. Okay, we're seeing it unveiled. Remember, he just talked about a veil being on the heart 2-3 verses earlier. Okay? And so we have to connect that is more the issue. Verse 13 talked about Moses putting on a veil over his face, okay, because they couldn't look at it straight. Stop being all veiled in me, but start looking at things straight. This is not, by the way, a verse saying that you don't need a middleman, you don't need to go through Moses or a teacher or any of those other things. You do receive things directly, but use it unfiltered. Receive it unfiltered. Be willing to look straight at it and see it for what it is. Okay? Next question.
All right, I'm going to combine these two. It's from Pete Lamb and Leanne. They're referring to, it says, please clear up what is meant in 2 Corinthians 5:21, where it says that he was made sin. And they're both kind of asking, is this speaking of the end where Yeshua asked why God has forsaken him? That was from Pete Lamb. And
all right, look, again, we are guessing when we read Paul's letters. I will give you my guess. Everything I said today was my best guess interpretation of what Paul was really saying, because we don't have Paul here to tell us, and he's writing in a language from 2,000 years ago, and with phrases and stuff. My best guess here, and I think I said this already in the teaching, is that he, by doing what he did, took that which otherwise could not be taken upon himself to remove it from us in terms of our rap sheet. Okay? That's the ordinances written against us. They used to put on the cross or on the stake when they would crucify somebody, the rap sheet. In other words, all the charges against you. So he's using a phrase idiomatically here, he who knew no sin, to be sin for us. Not that he was sin for us, but he took the rap sheet to himself so that we don't have that being held against us anymore. Now, of course, once you embrace him, everything you do forward after that, you own it. Okay? But when you repent, it could get added to what he took away, so that you don't have the ultimate penalty, which is you are now permanently separated from the camp. It's a restoration sort of phraseology he's putting there about being restored, but it's a way that Paul's just using the phrase, he who knew no sin, because he knew no sin. Well, if he knew no sin, how could he become sin for us? Well, because he took upon himself the rap sheet, so that we could become the righteousness, so that we would no longer look stained and unrighteous.
Okay, from Kui Lee, if we've had bad authority in our lives and still struggle with authority, how can we learn to submit to proper authority?
This is a really good question. It comes up a lot. The best thing to do is you're going to have to taste of it. Give it 6 months. Give it a year. I did that with Nate. I said, listen, it's up to you guys, but I said, look, give me a year and see what happens. I mean, do it, and if it looks really, you've had enough experience that if something looks really bad, you'll stop and you'll run away from it, but trust it, try it, taste of it, and see. You have to first intellectualize and rationalize to yourself and understand that the structure should be vertical, and that there's a right structure, even if it's been done badly, and that you need to find it. Ephesians 4 and the fivefold ministry. You need to find those guys. Well, then the only way you're going to know if you found them is to try it. You have to try it and taste of it. But you're not going to know after 5 minutes. You're going to have to give it 6 months, a year at least to see. And then just sitting around is not tasting of it. You need to call that leadership, meet with that leadership, ask that leadership for help and guidance, and see what kind of counsel and guidance you get. And then when you submit to it, see what kind of fruit you get. As several people in here have said, they've gotten guidance, they didn't like it, they didn't agree with it, but they did it anyway and they got the fruit. That's submission. And praise Yah for that. Okay? But the only way to get there is you have to be willing. Look, it's like the person that had their heart broken 3 or 4 or 5 times. It happens a lot when we're teenagers. Yet somehow we're willing to give it another try until we finally find the right one. If you gave up just because you had your heart broken a few times, you'd never find the right one or give that right one a chance. You have to keep trying. But you only keep trying because you believe that there is a right one, whether it's leadership or a spouse. That's why you keep trying. Okay? And so when you recognize that the leadership structure is right, even if though you haven't experienced it, then keep looking for a place where you can experience it. Well, when I say experience, keep looking for a place where you can experience it hopefully correctly. Look for the place that has the best opportunity to possibly do it right. And of course, that's why I like when people stand up around the room and give their testimony, so to speak, of how they have experienced it, because then that should encourage people to give it a shot. Because you have people telling you, we have tasted of it, and it worked. Okay? And the places where and by the way, when you hear people telling you that, bad-mouthing leadership when others are telling you it worked, find out if the person that says it didn't work actually tasted of it, or what their experience was before you start listening to because there are people out there attacking me just as well as the people here saying that it's worked very well for them. But you know what? Find out the attackers how much experience they actually have had and how much they actually interacted and how much counseling they actually did. As opposed to listening to like Nate and Dawn and some of the others here, who have interacted on an extensive basis. and have that experience. Trisha, etc. People, Dawid and his wife, Manny and Michelle. There are people that have interacted with me a lot more. Find out the comparison. Ask the people that are saying negative things, well, how much did you actually interact with them? How much counseling did you do? What things did he recommend for you to do in counsel that you did blew up in your face? Okay, nothing. I'm not saying that cockily. I just know that I haven't given anybody yet anything that blew up in their face.
From Roy Bolsher-Coates, chapter 3, verse 14, was it Yahweh that hardened their minds? Has he hardened Pharaoh's heart? Or was it just the leadership of the day that caused the disruption that led to minds hardening? No, look, remember, in Pharaoh's day, the hardening was taking somebody who already had a disposition and encouraging it to go in the direction it already wanted to go. This is essentially not an Elohim thing. It's just people's hearts are hardened because they have it set in the direction they want to go. Now, Elohim got involved in the Pharaoh thing because he wasn't through with Pharaoh, because Pharaoh was starting to think like, well, he was going to let them go, but he really didn't want to let them go. In your life that's being talked about here, and Paul's talking about the Corinthians' lives, their hearts were hardened because they were wanting to go in the direction they wanted to go, which didn't match up with what Yah wanted them to do. So yes, there's a linkage from the point of view that it still has to do with being disposed to go in the direction you want to go. But no, this is not Elohim. As a matter of fact, it talks about the master of this age having involvement also in encouraging them to do what they want to do, to go their way. By the way, for all you wannabe teachers out there, see how much fun this can be? But I don't mind doing this because I know it's important and necessary. But I'm just saying is, appreciate that you probably don't find other teachers out there, especially open mic, online, willing to take any question, so to speak, because it could be anything. I'm just saying, that's not this is almost like Paul saying, do I need to recommend myself? It says, you have a teacher willing to do things that others don't do. Maybe that matters, maybe it doesn't matter, but, just pointing that out. Okay? Next question. I think that's it for anything that's related to today's teaching.
Okay, all those unrelated things, please contact us directly if you still want answers to those questions. Nate?
I just wanted to, if I might, reiterate what you said about following leadership. If you're going to find a teacher that you vetted, I think Abba gives us an opportunity to learn about how we can physically walk out the fullness of the intent of Torah by allowing us to fall under leadership in the fullness of the intent of Torah, trusting that Abba is going to help us get to the kingdom. If we kind of do it halfway and not trust that Abba is going to work through you, then we're just being like the Israelites before they went into the land and not trusting our Father. We need to give it everything, even if we don't understand it, the fullness of the intent with all of our heart, all of our soul, and all of our strength in order to please Abba and show him that we're ready. We'll take the fruit, Abba. We see the fruit. We trust it. We trust you that you're going to help us to get from point A to point B.
Amen. Look, none of this even should remotely sound like blind following. This is wide-eyed, paying attention, because I want you to be paying attention to what's being done, what's being counseled, how it's working. We're not asking, and should never be asking for any kind of blind, just submission or whatever, but taking an opportunity to taste of it. In other words, let's just try it, but I'm going to pay attention to how it's working and what the results are and how I felt. You can say, how did I feel when Rabbi said this? How did I feel when that was being given? And pay attention to all of the details. I want you to have a higher paying attention, not less. I don't want you just to blindly. There's no point to that. But you should have an incredibly high level of awareness as you counsel and then as you apply what's counseled to see how it plays through. Then you'll know if what you're doing is in the right function, in the right way, in the right structure, etc. Okay? Because otherwise people say, oh, you just want everybody just to do the, no, I don't. I want you to do what I just said. Have the highest level of awareness, but give it a try. But what's a try? Well, you're gonna have to really do it for a while. That means even if you don't like it, you do it anyway. It's not gonna hurt anything. I'm not gonna wreck any major decisions in your life. I'm not even gonna get involved in anything that's your own personal stuff unless you ask me to do that. And even then I may tell you I don't wanna get involved in your very personal stuff. If it's halachic, if it's the Torah, if it's the walk, if it's a husband and wife, if it's a parent and child, and you would like some guidance. But if you don't apply it, then you'll never know if it would have worked. You have to try it, okay? You can't just say, well, I didn't like what he said, so the counsel was no good. How do you know? Maybe it would have worked. You got to try it, okay? And trust me, every one of the people that gets up here and says that they've tried it and it worked will all tell you that often enough they didn't agree or didn't like it, but they did it anyway. And then it worked. Okay, so it's not like they just sitting there just going, wow, I agree with everything Rabbi says, and I just do whatever he says because I agree with everything. That does not happen. Okay? But when they do it anyway, they're finally walking in submission, something we really, all human beings struggle with. And submission, as I've said 1,000,000 times, doesn't come into play until you disagree or don't like what you're being asked to do or not do. Okay, when you don't like what the authority's telling you, that's when submission comes in. When you don't agree, otherwise it's not submission. It's agreement. I've had husbands and wives say, well, I submit to him all the time, the wife will say, and I'm like, okay, when you agree with him or when you disagree with him? Because when you agree, it's not submission. You just agree. Of course you're going to do it. You agree. You're not submitting to anything. Submission means subjugating what I want for what you want, or listening to you even though I don't agree or don't like it, because I'm going to submit. I'm going to subjugate my desire, my will to yours. That doesn't happen until we disagree. If we agree, we're just both merrily just running along. Okay? Anyway, that should cover it. Good? Shabbat!